Promises to be extremely interesting. I know most of you here in the room, but I do believe there are some supervisors here that I have not had the honor of meeting. My name is Megan McGarvey. I'm Director of Public Relations for CarolinaEast Health System. I've been with the organization collectively, I lost count, I think about 25 years, 26 years, something like that. It did take a little brief battle. I came back to this wonderful organization in 2008, and I will tell you, it was a blessing to be able to come home, because I really did feel like I came home. But the session that we are going to have this afternoon, as you can see, is on social media awareness. And we have three very talented presenters. And we're going to start with Ms. Susan Broughton. Susan is one of my favorite people, you know, her husband, is a technology coordinator and trainer at Keller Williams Realty in New Bern. She's been teaching the Working with iPads course at Craven Community College for 2 years, as well as at the News River Region Association of Realtors. She has presented programs on social media, smartphones, and iPads for several organizations, including the Havelock Chamber of Commerce, great organization, and the Riverbend Recreation Department. She is a self-confessed geek and information junkie who is well informed about social media systems, as they are crucial for promoting business and establishing a personal brand in the real estate industry. Susan and her husband Tom settled in New Bern when Major General Broughton retired from the Marine Corps in 2001, and we are really glad that they decided to stay here. They're involved in many organizations and causes locally, and believe we should all strive to make our home a better place, and not only now but in the future. And they have done that in our region. I don't know if you were climbing, you know how to say no to anybody when they make a request. It is my privilege to introduce Ms. Susan Broughton.
We had an industrial revolution that we all kind of remember, and we are now in an irrevocable digital revolution. It is the way we live now, it's the way we do business now. In the industry that I'm in real estate, we do totally paperless transactions. We actually had an agent in our office who did an entire transaction from overseas through text messaging. So that's the generation that we're dealing with these days. And I say that because I don't want this to be a scary thing. It's a part of our lives that we just need to learn how to use appropriately, just like cell phones or talking in the elevator or whatever. We have to learn how to deal with it. And the fact is that privacy, as we used to know it, is pretty much gone, because the world knows so much more about us. Children have a digital shadow before they're 2 years old in almost every case in this country. So you can track back, and it's not just us, I mean, it's really probably throughout the world. Just read the slides, and we can start over with this first one. that gives you an idea of what is happening in the digital world these days. We're wearing it, you can pin it on, you can wear it on a watch, and everybody is connected in all sorts of ways, and it's impacting our lives. If you think about marketing, when we're talking about branding, you may not think you have a brand, but the hospital has a brand, you as a medical professional have a brand, and you have to think about what people are saying about you and the way you're representing yourself, because everything we do eventually seems to end up online. In fact, if you've never Googled yourself, you probably should, because you will find every instance of yourself. And I found out that people with the same name as my husband, there's a champion bass fisherman in Minnesota, and there's a guy who builds incredible craftsman-style homes in Seattle, and I can't decide which one I want to trade him for. When you think about communications, human beings started out communicating around a campfire, and that was the range of your communication. So you could talk around your campfire, and the people in your tight community knew what you said, and that was really it. It didn't go any further. With the invention of the printing press, then ideas could travel in books and spread throughout the world. Now we have the internet, which spreads things everywhere, but what it's allowed us to do is create tribes, campfires, that are now beyond our physical borders, but extend everywhere. So if you are interested in say, genealogy, or in my case, lymphedema, I can connect with people throughout the world who have the same interests, and we are on our own little campfire in Facebook as a private group. So our communications go way beyond our physical boundaries now. And so I think of those as digital tribes. So we don't have a physical connection anymore, we have a digital connection with people. When they say there's an app for that, they're not joking. There's actually an app for how to survive the zombie apocalypse and dog nutrition. So that's the range of things. But in terms of social media, we've got Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, Instagram, YouTube, Snapchat. That's the one where you take a picture and you can tell it how long it lasts. It lasts a little longer than you think. Pinterest, somebody described Pinterest to me as fantasy football for women. Google Plus, Vine, those are those little 6-second videos that you can share, interactive games, blogs, texting, email, and what's new tomorrow? Because there are right now 1 million apps in the Apple App Store, and that has grown from 240,000 2 years ago. So things are growing exponentially. So we can't even talk about what's next because we don't know what's next. In terms of Facebook, there are 1.3 billion active monthly users on Facebook. It's the world. The average time spent per day is 21 minutes. A wide variety of privacy settings are constantly changing. You think you've caught up with the Facebook settings to protect yourself and to only share with the people that you want, and you go in and check the settings tomorrow when they change the rules. You can share your Facebook information with other apps. If you've ever gone to some place and they say you want to log in with Facebook, that's connecting Facebook and all those other apps. Personal information about the user is all over the internet, and you can be tagged in photos that will appear on your timeline even though you weren't actually in them. So people can put stuff on your timeline you don't even know about. Sharing risks. Friends and friends of friends can share what you post. So if you post to a friend and they have friends, they can, you think you've only shared it with your friends and friends of friends, they can then share it beyond that. With Twitter, I can't do Twitter, I can't do anything in 140 characters or less, but those are called tweets. It's mostly used on mobile devices. You can tweet links, links to other things, photos, your messages, whatever you want. Many celebrities, and a lot of people who aren't celebrities, have a lot of followers. Kim Kardashian, 18 million. President Obama, 39 million followers on Twitter. If you look in the guidelines, in the stuff that you never read when you say, yeah, I'll accept this, you'll realize that shared photos can be used or sold to another entity by Twitter. In 2014, Twitter started something called bug bounty. They will pay people who find bugs in the system for their vulnerabilities. And what you tweet comes and goes quickly, but it's there forever. If you have a Twitter feed, they go they go by really fast. You can't find the thing that was just posted a minute ago, but it's still out there if you search it. Snapchat is that thing where you take pictures, you edit them, you can add graffiti like smiles and, mustaches and all that on the pictures, and you can set a time limit on how long they're going to exist, and then they disappear, and you think, wow, it's gone, that's great. Well, if somebody that you know copied it, took a screenshot of it, shared it, it's there forever. You set the limit for it to disappear, but you don't have any control about what happens once you send it. And you can save chats and stories on your device. There are blogs and emails. There are some interesting blogs. I did a little research on the health medical community. Of course, we know about Caring Bridge, which patients can use, which is a wonderful way to share information. And I found a site called A Nerdy Nurse, which is an example of how a blog can be done well, because she posts information about how to protect yourself. So that's an overview of what social media is like. And in our panel, we're going to talk more about the relevance exactly for you, but what does it mean more to where this world, this digital world we live in? That's your intro.
Thank you, Susan.
You're welcome.
As she said, there will be a panel discussion with this presentation. We actually have 3 presenters. Our next is Detective Sal Zangi with the New York Police Department. He's been part of the police department since January 1989. He holds general, intermediate, and advanced law enforcement certificates. In 2006, then Officer Zangi transferred from patrol to the Criminal Investigative Division Major Case Unit, which is a television program. Major crime, love it. He is currently assigned to the Forensics Evidence Unit and serves as a crime scene investigator. He was selected for the United States Secret Service's basic computer evidence recovery and mobile device data recovery training at the National Computer Forensic Institute. He is certified as a seized computer evidence recovery specialist and is assigned to the North Carolina State Bureau of Investigation's Internet Crimes Against Children Task Force. One of the reasons we decided that we needed to present this subject matter today is because it is kind of a dangerous place out there. And we titled this, You Can't Hide Online. But Detective Zangi actually has hidden online. He has posed as an 11-year-old girl to actually help take down a predator, an adult predator. And Detective Zangi is going to share with us some of the reasons why you can't hide online and how online communication is used forensically. Sal, thank you.
In 26 years, I know a few of you out there. I'm glad y'all like it. Don't know you from work. I've had the opportunity and the privilege to go through. Now I don't know what to touch. Sorry about that. Okay, I like starting. Sorry about that. I like starting with that video because a lot of times, us as older adults, we don't realize some of the things, and I include ourselves in that goes on the internet. There's people like that. I'm sure all over in New Bern. I've had many cases with child pornography, doing that sort of thing. But today, I'm not really going to talk about child pornography. We'll talk more about the technology involved behind it and how they are pretty much there forever. One of my classes at down in Hoover, Alabama, was with the Secret Service, and one of the gentlemen there used his cell phone at one of our trainings. He pulled his iPhone out that he's had for approximately a year. He put it on one of the machines that we have here at the Hoover Police Department, and he pulled up over a year's worth of messages from his phone. He didn't realize they were still on his phone. This was a police officer that had been working cybercrime and that sort of thing for quite a while, and he didn't realize it. I say that to say, you guys might be shocked if I was to forensically examine your cell phone, or your child's, or your spouse's, whatever. You would be shocked. Pretty much everything that you look at on the computer, on the cell phone, it stays there. Without getting too technical, your hard drives are broken up into blocks of information, into sectors. And some of you may remember the VHS tapes, beta tapes, that sort of thing, VCR tapes. When you record a movie, if you start at the beginning and record all the way to the end, and then later, let's use your wedding. You record the wedding on the tape, but then your husband finds the tape sitting there, not realizing what it is, and he wants to record a little part of the football game or whatever. He overwrites the first part of the wedding. Well, when the wedding stops, or excuse me, when the football game stops, and the wedding that was there before, all that data is still there. It's pretty much the same way with your computer. It's kind of like a card catalog system in a library. Some of you are familiar with an actual card catalog. Nowadays, they don't know what that is. But it's the same principle with the file on the computer. In your master file table on your computer, basically gives the computer instructions where to go to find that data. That card catalog, that physical card, if you pull that away, the book is still in the library. The same thing with the file in your computer. It's there until you physically write that exact spot on that hard drive. Now that can be scary for some people. Probably one of the best things, and the most important things that you can learn today is think before you post. Not too long ago I ran across this, there was a 14, I've had so many different cases, hope I get the age right. It was either a 14 or 16-year-old. He was chatting with someone online, and the person on the other end he thought was an older girl, a 17-year-old girl. She convinced him to masturbate online to her. Well, this person on the other end ended up being a young man, one of this gentleman's classmates. After he recorded this video, he then shared it with every one of his classmates in school. Okay, now think about this is out on the internet. Not only is it in everyone's computers that it went to, but it went across the internet. Across many different servers. We don't even know how many. But to make things even worse, when his parents called me, the young boy's parents, they wanted me to arrest the person on the other end that recorded it and then sent it. Brought up a little issue. Now you got to think legal is kind of black and white. I had to step back. Okay, so now I have your child. He took a picture, he took a video of himself. Okay, as a parent you think, okay, there's not much wrong with it, but in the eyes of the law, your son produced child pornography, even though it was himself. He produced child pornography, and then he distributed it, he sent it out. Now the person on the other end that recorded it, he pretty much did the same thing. So in order to charge this person, I was going to have to charge the victim, the one that started it all. When you start dealing with the internet and that sort of thing, things get out of hand very quick. In the eyes of the law, well, let me stop right there for 1 second. And most of you know how this works. We've all seen that thing with the different demonstrations where I whisper one thing in this ear and at the end of the room it's a totally different story. That's how things work, so to speak, on the internet. It goes crazy. And what was initially the story ends up being something totally different. Now, as the police department and also the hospital, and all of y'all here, pictures that you post. texts that you send out. Are you positive that person on the other end is the only one getting that text, that picture? I mean, think about that. Are you positive? Are you willing to risk losing your job over that? I wanted to bring this up just for informational purposes. In the state of North Carolina, if you're over 16, you can be arrested. However, for child pornography, it's 18. So it's less than 18. I thought that was kind of weird. And there's a couple little, I hate to say weird, but there's a couple little things like that in the legal system. Number of registered sex offenders in North Carolina. Anybody have any idea how many? There is, in New Bern there is 93, which works out to be 1 in every 33 people based on population. There is 747,000 in the United States, sex offenders. It's crazy. It is just crazy. Going back towards social media a little bit, I just threw 1,200 in there. A lot of you that have Facebook, MySpace, whatever, there's so many different social medias anymore. 1,200? Do you really have 1,200 friends? Can you share what you share with your husband or wife too? We need to think about this when we start posting things, if we even decide that we should be posting things. I also threw in there about child, and this is where I've had a lot of weird training. I have to look at pictures of little boys and little girls and estimate their age. I've gone through some similar training that some of the doctors have gone through just so that we can say, yep, that's definitely prepubescent, pubescent, whatever. And a lot of times, well, anymore, with this little, I'll just say this little demon right here, because we give it to our child and we don't tell them what they can and cannot do, or we don't put limitations on things. I've had a case with a 9-year-old that was taking pictures of herself on the toilet, using the toilet, and in the same case there was a 13-year-old, 14-year-old, and an 11-year-old. They were taking pictures and they were sending the pictures back and forth to each other. Parents, grandparents, we need to think about these things when we're giving our children these computers, cameras, and everything else that's in these things. Just got some different things right here. I thought it was kind of unusual, and it kind of, I've seen similar things in some of the cases I've dealt with sending different pictures. And I've done a lot of cases with sexting and child pornography, pretty much anything with computers and cell phones. I'm the person at the New Bern Police Department, and because of my training, I'm the only one in this part of the state that does all this. I've worked with the Sheriff's Department, I worked with Onslow County, I got sworn in as an expert witness in Onslow County Onslow County Superior Court. Carteret County. I've done it all, and I've heard some of these examples here, and it blows me away. Especially when I'm dealing with these teenagers, because you know how teenagers, they change boyfriend and girlfriends kind of like they change their clothes and take showers and this and that. Sometimes it can be very frequently. And I say that to say, you guys are sending your texts, sending your pictures. What are your pictures of? Can it be shared on the internet? Got a couple examples right here. I thought it was kind of crazy. probably was probably a good teacher, but she decided to put a post out there. How do you think that went over with her job? This one might touch home here, not saying that you have a messy hospital room or anything like that, but this nurse saw some stuff on the floor in the hospital. She took a picture of it. She sent it to her friend. Well, it got out. I believe that nurse lost her job over something as innocent, but at the same time as critical as that, because it can open up a lot of different doors that you don't want to open. I mean, think about what we're doing, what we're taking the pictures of, what we're sending out. Something as innocent as that can turn into something close. What would happen if someone got one of those infections where I can't even think what it's called there. Within that week at the hospital, and then all of a sudden this picture shows up. How many liabilities would that open up? I mean, it's over something as innocent as this. This young lady right here went to England. Took a picture. She was a school teacher. She took a picture drinking a beer. She happened to curse in one of her things one of her tweets. Between this picture and one curse word, it didn't say what the curse word was, but she lost her job over it. She was out of the country. Hold on, giving this a cost, and we really need to pay attention to what we're putting out, what we're sending us. I know I left this welcoming parents to on purpose because I know most of you here probably still have parents, or still have children or grandchildren here. And just as a reminder, probably the biggest thing is, and I know it's easy, most of the kids have their laptops and they're in their rooms and stuff, but if you're not watching them, just like with the phone, you don't know what they're doing. You don't know what they're doing. So I encourage you all to pay attention a little bit more what your children are doing with these computers. But let's try to put them in the common areas, in the living room. And I know it's hard because you're trying to do your work, you're bringing work home from wherever, you're doing whatever, but we need to think about what's going on. I could actually go on and on and on, but I know we're going to come up here in just a few minutes and do something else, so I'm just going to end it like that, just let you all think about the picture program.
Would you talk about one thing solid, because I think it's important,
Yes.
and that's how location is.
Okay.
Because it might be pertinent for that post about the
Yes,
hospital.
yes. Now, we're going to get geeky, we're going to get nerdy here a little bit. In pictures, they have what's called metadata. And what metadata is data about the data, basically. So it's the information about the picture. So most of us here have these smartphones. And if you have your GPS turned on, every time you take a picture, your GPS stamp goes on that picture. Even though you can't see it, your GPS stamp is on that picture in the background, in the metadata. And that's what I can do, or people that know about this stuff can get into it and find it. So we can actually find out exactly where you were when you took that picture. Now that can be real dangerous, not only for just a picture of the hospital, but think about your child if they were at the beach or whatever. You can open yourself up to a lot of bad things happening.
It's also timestamp.
Yes, date and timestamp. And actually it also tells you the camera that it took, what type of equipment you used to take it. It gives you specific settings on the focal length. It gives you everything. Everything about how the picture was taken and when.
So that data follows the picture?
Yes,
I
ma'am.
mean, meaning it would obviously be on my device, but if I sent it to you, you would know where I took that picture?
Yes, ma'am. Now, some of the social media sites, now I say some because not all of them do it, some of them strip the metadata, but not all of them. If you want a chance, some pervert find out where your child is, then don't pay attention to it. But I encourage you, please, because there's a lot of crazy people out there. Did that answer your question, ma'am?
since 1998 after 20-plus years in private law practice with emphasis on litigation, health law, and employment law. That's why we're so lucky to get her. Originally from southwestern Pennsylvania and northern West Virginia, she's lived in New Bern since 1986. I love this. I did not know this about her. She holds a Bachelor of Science in Music, piano major, voice minor.
I'm about ready to bang this gavel.
And she has a master's degree in counseling and guidance and is a member of the North Carolina and West Virginia bars. Cindy loves animals and is devoted to her lovable rescued kitten, Lexi. Cindy Durkin.
I've always said that this is a formidable group to appear in front of, and I'd rather argue in front of a jury. But having been in front of you as with a robe and a gavel, I really am challenged to come up here without those props. But I'm speaking here today very quickly because I'm not the experts about the technical considerations that are so important here. But Ray had asked me to share something with you that as colleagues in healthcare, I thought was some practical information you might want to be aware of, because it was enlightening to me, and it's the world I live in, and it's why I have a bottle of Excedrin migraine that I carry with me regularly. I had the privilege, let me say the opportunity, to sit and observe a medical malpractice case that our hospital was a part of in late July and early August. And it was a unique experience for me because as a litigator, I was used to being at the defense counsel table, and I really had to restrain myself a couple of times from making an objection. One time it almost did, something was said in the courtroom and I almost shouted objection. But I was in the role of being the corporate representative for the hospital. So I sat with the healthcare providers who were going to testify, some of whom were parties in the case, as well as had the chance to sit with other providers who were involved in the case. Got the chance to help watch the selection of the jury, which is especially enlightening when you work at the hospital, because what we're doing when we're selecting a jury is trying to find people who are objective enough to listen to the evidence and judge the case based on the evidence. And as you go through the process of selecting jurors that you hope will judge the case fairly and objectively, you have to ask them questions about what their experience has been at the hospital, what their perception has been of the hospital, what experiences their family have had, etc. And listening to those answers was a little painful for me at times, because it led me to realize how many people, some of whom have clinical training and some of whom do not, judge us. And the opportunities we have every day that we don't even realize that impact people and that create either a perception of confidence or a perception of distrust in what we do. And we often only have a very limited opportunity to control how people perceive us. And they share with one another how they perceive us. So you might have a potential juror who, while he himself did not have a bad experience, had heard from his neighbor about a bad experience and judged us accordingly. So that process was a challenge to sit through. But what was even more challenging, and we had had a preview of this in a mediation that we conducted prior to the actual trial. And in North Carolina, in cases like medical malpractice cases, the law requires that you attempt to resolve the matter before you go to court and trial through a mediation process with a mediator. We were not the only defendant in the case. There were some other healthcare providers and their personnel who were involved in the case. And when we were sitting in mediation, the plaintiff's attorney, and Greg, you often say to me, I want to smack people when they frustrate me. I really wanted to smack this guy. But from our place, but it was a healthcare provider who was caring for the patient whose care was the subject of this medical malpractice case. The patient had died. The patient's family, which consisted of a wife and a couple of adult children, were the ones involved in pursuing the case. This attorney represented them. And that attorney flashed up the Facebook postings of a particular provider that had been posted while the provider was caring for the father in this case, and the gentleman had died. The posts were comments that this provider was making about some of the patients the provider was caring for at the same time. And one of the posts was to the effect of how gratifying it is to see a happy mentally ill patient. Had nothing to do with the particular gentleman who died, but it was somebody else that this provider was caring for at the same time. The other thing the provider had posted was comments about a sports event the provider was watching. Again, while the provider was caring for this particular gentleman who later expired. That provider did not end up being at the trial of the case because following mediation, the provider's insurer settled their part of the case. Had it gone to trial, there was every indication that the judge may let those social media postings in at trial. And I can tell you from just not being clinical myself, but respecting what all of you who are clinical and who work in healthcare do, lay people don't understand some of the ways that you healthcare providers talk to one another, and some of the language that you use that you might perceive as not offensive, but as just kind of slang within your profession and healthy bantering, and it's part of your stress management, I think. Laymen don't understand that. And when it shows up on a social media post, and it shows up while you're caring for a particular patient or a family member, it doesn't play well. And it ends up not being understood, and if there's been a bad result, you don't get the benefit of the doubt. This particular provider did not get the benefit of the doubt, even though I think the provider gave very good care. And the provider had nothing to do with what ultimately happened to this gentleman who expired. Family never would get to that point and would always hold that provider responsible because the provider didn't get a benefit of the doubt because of the nature of the social media posts. We didn't get the benefit of anything from a family who had lost a loved one and who just assumed that we, like other providers, are uncaring or are casual about the way we care for patients. So for whatever reason, I think it's just very important that we recognize that the world out there is going to hold us to very high expectations. And the more healthcare costs, and the more people feel they're caught up in a system they can't control, and the more we are out there as individuals and as professionals sharing information, commenting about what we're doing, the more we lose the veil of privacy and confidentiality that we've tried so hard to protect. And the more we expose ourselves and our organization to things that maybe we don't always deserve, but we're not going to get the benefit of the doubt about. It was an enlightening experience, and it was one that when we finished it, and I was talking with my colleagues and with Ray about it, I mean, I've been a lawyer for a long time, but I have not had the opportunity to sit through a medical malpractice case for a long time, and certainly not as an observer. It was an enlightening experience, and it made me almost, well, it did make me very passionate about seizing every opportunity we can in our day-to-day lives to protect ourselves from doing something that looks like we don't care, or we're being casual, or we're not covering the bases, or we're preoccupied with ourselves or what's going on with us personally while we're trying to do our jobs. Even though many people can multitask well, if something goes sour when you're caring for a patient, you're not going to get the benefit of somebody giving you the credit that you gave priority attention to that patient. When we are in cases, whether they be an employment law case or a medical case, the kinds of requests for information that we will get and that I have to help us respond to are moving more and more into the realm of what we call e-discovery, electronic discovery, where what we have to produce are all the emails, and where the attorney for the other side will hire experts to get at the metadata that is behind all those emails, all the other things, the social media posts, anything will potentially fall in this realm of electronic discovery information that we have to produce. We have a network here at work that we manage, and we strive to keep the security and integrity of it intact. That becomes a growing challenge as people get casual about the way they use it and use it on work time for things that are not necessarily work related, or for things that put the system in potential harm's way or being breached by somebody who has the skills to penetrate it. So we're just living in a world where there's transparency whether or not we want it. Privacy is only worth as much as the last post you put on social media or the last email you wrote. And where the first thing an attorney who's out to discredit us or is looking for information to use against us will look is to mine social media. And when the case was over and I had the opportunity to talk with the attorney for the other side, he said that's the first thing I do is I hire somebody to start checking the social media of everybody who's going to be deposed in the case, everybody who has touched this patient. This is what we do. It's there. So if you're looking for a job, or if you're doing a job, and you're posting information about yourself anywhere where somebody can get a hold of it, it will follow you for the rest of your life, professionally and personally. And that's a scary thought to me. Anyway, that's my limited comment, and I have learned a lot from these two professionals I've had the opportunity to work with, so I think it's an eye-opener for you as well. Okay?
All right, Cindy, if you'd like to stay on stage and take your panel. Have our other panelists, and we really want to open up the floor for questions and answers. I have a couple of questions I'd like to ask the panelists, but while they're getting situated, I'd like to share two stories about social media faux pas by hospital employees. One is not our hospital. It's a hospital that is in Michigan. A woman came into the emergency department, apparently nice, very nice looking young woman, and she was being cared for by a PA. And apparently the PA really kind of liked what she looked like from behind. And so he snapped a picture and cropped it down. There was no patient identifier, nothing like that. Couldn't see her face. And he posted, "I like what I like." Well, a friend of his saw that, shared that. Remember when Detective Zaney was talking about the metadata, the location, the timestamp? Well, somehow this photo got back to this woman, and she was able to decipher the metadata. She knew that was behind, and she knew she had been at that hospital at that time. Not only was that PA dismissed, every employee in that organization that liked that photo, bye-bye. They were gone. Another example, and I will be very vague with this, did actually happen here. I was made aware of it by a friend of mine on Facebook who messaged me and said, Megan, did you see what was up on Facebook? There had been a very, very unfortunate accident that took place, and there was a fatality in the accident. And somebody had commented on the newspaper article. They had shared the link. I don't even remember where it started. But there was comments that were made. And one of the comments, the fatality was brought to our organization for care. And one of the comments was, have they released that the patient passed? The other comment, and this was not made by one of our employees, but it was about an action of one of our employees. No, a friend of mine who worked to save her told me. Now, how'd they tell her? They tweet her, text her, but somehow, and so a friend of mine, I didn't even see the post. A friend of mine sent me a message on Facebook and said, you gotta see this. She said, if this, and this is a healthcare provider, she doesn't work with us, but she works locally. And she said, if that had been my family member, and I had seen that, they hadn't released to the media, but somebody who worked with her told a friend that she had passed. She said, I would have been curious. She said, and I would have been on the phone with you. That did happen here. So things that you really don't even feel that could be like I said, a social media faux pas, or an invasion of privacy, or just an inappropriate post. Very well can be. So, that for me. Again, we're opening up the floor to Q&A. One of the things that I would like to ask the panelists, Cindy, could you perhaps address the difference between confidentiality and privacy?
I'm glad I did Google that. That's how I do my legal research. There is, those terms are used interchangeably, just to make a long story short, because it intrigued me too. Privacy is more the personal right that each of us has not to be disturbed. Have our self-contained space around us, so to speak, literally and figuratively. It's a common law right. It's one that I think in this day and age, as I said, if you post anything, you've probably taken away that piece of your privacy, or you've given it away. Confidentiality is more a status that we give certain information. It's an imposed status. We say that we want to keep our banking information confidential, our medical information confidential. So we brand it in some way in an effort to say, be careful with this. This is to be used only under appropriate circumstances. That itself may only be worth what we call confidential. Depending on where it goes and whose hands it falls, it may not retain that status. We as attorneys, and you often will see my emails and other things marked confidential, privileged, et cetera, et cetera. I do that in part because even if it does end up in somebody's hands who may be inclined to share it or not respect its confidentiality, I always have a basis for saying, look, I told you in advance, I intended this to be treated and maintained as confidential information. Your privacy is the scope and nature of it is what you personally define. Make sense? I was going to say one thing, and I will let these two experts talk, but I ran into something when I was looking into stuff for this that intrigued me, and I don't know whether you even think this is worth as much thought as I gave it, but one of the things that in an employer-employee relationship that something like Facebook can create a dilemma about is blurring the lines between supervisors and people who are supervised. So if you become a friend of one of your people you supervise and you're the manager, supervisor of that person, and you are a friend on Facebook, or you in some way engage in a social media exchange with the person for whom you are the supervisor, you potentially could blur the lines so that if something happens and that person is, let's say you praise them for doing something really well, or you say they're a stellar employee, etc., and then they have performance issues down the road, they can possibly use that prior information you created about them, praising them for something, to say, well, I wasn't bad at this point, and nobody ever told me that my status changed for being the stellar employee that you praised me for being at that point. It can mess up things in a way that at least we would have to try to trace what happened. And I'm just saying, you could be manipulated, or information could be manipulated to distort what were the facts. I never have to sort it out. Does that make any sense? Okay, that struck me. So anyway, I'm done with that.
Okay, so following that, Sal, when you do post something online, should you still have any expectation of privacy, or is that gone? When you put something on Facebook,
Pretty much when you put something online, you might as well, it's there. You lost all expectation of privacy. Because if I share stuff with, like Susan said earlier, if I share stuff with Miss Cindy and Susan, not only do the people, do they have access to it, but all of their friends also have access to it. So, no, you actually lose all of your expectation of privacy when you post something. It goes out on the internet. And not only just their computers, there's a lot of servers that, a lot of other computers that those things go across. And who knows what, I'll just say their IT are doing with that information. We don't know. If you see, it's, I'll just have it.
in other words,
I found an example that may apply. In Facebook, you can set up private groups, and you can set the level of privacy for them. And I found an instance in some research that I was doing of a group of healthcare staff, nurses on a floor. You know more about how you organize yourself than I do. But they were using a Facebook group to share information, like shift change information, updates that they thought was in a closed group. It was a private group, it was just theirs. But you can't ensure that that's private. And so they got in some trouble for using what is designed. I mean, this is called social media for a reason. It's social. It's not a business relationship within that. We could set up private networks that really can be private, but to use something like Facebook to share that kind of job information was just inappropriate. But it seemed like a good idea at the time, and maybe in my job, we use it for our staff, but we don't do anything that's nearly as important as what you do, and we don't have confidentiality concerns among our staff like you do. In terms of the confidentiality, I think we live in such a world of selfies now. Everybody wants to take a picture, and I know you can't be responsible for what the family members of your patients or your patients do, but everybody's got a camera on them. And now with wearable stuff, they've got a watch on, they'll take a picture, so you never know what's happening. But if they take pictures, let's say that I ran into an instance of a student nurse who was about to leave. So she was about to graduate, and she had been very involved with the care of a child. And so before she left, the family wanted to take a picture, so they took a picture of her with the child. So the family knew that they were doing this, but she got in all kinds of trouble and actually did not graduate because of the way this information was posted and the information that was revealed in it, which should have been confidential information. If you take a selfie in the hospital and there's a board behind you showing patient names, or if there's somebody walking down the hall at the time you're doing it, and that's date and time stamp, maybe that's someone who, let's say we had a celebrity in Newburgh who did not want to be identified as being in the hospital. That, when you post that, all that stuff that you don't think about that is in your picture then goes out there well. So it's a whole different kind of awareness that we have to have when we take pictures and post them for it, knowing where you are and what time you were there and what was going on around you. So.
And I think too, if you'd like to comment additionally on how that works from the other side of the bed break. The family members who have those phones, like you said, that have the cameras, as you're delivering care, they can be videotaping you, you don't even know it.
And you don't even know. In fact, this is an incident not from healthcare, but from real estate. We realize that so many people have security cameras in their homes now so they can monitor their dogs or, whatever. If you're showing a home and that camera's on, so I'm a seller and I'm watching these people walk through my home and saying all sorts of nasty things about it. And talking about what they're willing to pay for it or how much financing they've got. All that information, which should be confidential, is now revealed to me. So negotiation becomes a whole different ballgame in that case. So now when we tell agents to walk through a house and say, just talk about, oh, I love the color of the walls or what a lovely sofa. And then when you get in the car, talk about the stuff that you don't want the seller to hear. But that applies to you as well, because you don't know what's being recorded, unfortunately. You just don't know. And then police officers face that all the time. So I think anytime you're in a professional relationship, you have to be aware that what you're doing and saying may well be recorded and shared by somebody that you don't know.
That speaks to reputation.
Absolutely.
How important do you think online reputation management is?
I think it's very important. My personal rule is don't say anything that you wouldn't say publicly to your grandmother. The video that I showed was about brand. Each one of you has a personal brand now that we're out in that world, and all of that becomes a piece of your brand. Now that doesn't mean you have to only talk that you can't talk about what you do, but it all builds the public picture of you. And I personally would rather have that be a positive picture than a negative one. Doesn't mean you're not realistic. You can say, I hate that football team. That's okay. But when you have to think about that, if somebody was reading a resume of you, trying to decide whether to do business with you or whether to trust you with their life, they can now see all of that. And it makes a difference on how people relate to you, and it is your brand, your personal brand.
And it's our organization's brand
And
as well.
My relationship with the organization's brand as well.
And I think Miss Cindy touched on perceptions, and that's perceptions. I mean, what can you say about it? Everyone here sees us all differently from where you're sitting. It's all about perceptions. And if all you know is that a picture of that ER room floor or whatever it was, that's all you're going to think about in the hospital every time you come to it. So what we post out there, what we're putting out for people to see, that's their perception of what is going on.
And I think that particular picture was an incident in New York City, and the person died, and it had been all over the news, and then they posted a picture about this is what the room looked after this incident, and the family was very upset because it showed what trauma this victim had gone through. It was very disturbing for the family. So you just never know how things are going to be perceived, and it is perception. And you're right, it looks like a dirty place, but I'm sure you all know what an operating room would look like after a trauma case, and that probably was pretty good compared to some of them. But people don't understand. It's like not understanding the lingo that you use in your business. You might think something's completely innocent, but when someone reads it, they would misunderstand that.
Pam?
So essentially, this brings us to you really cannot separate your professional and your personal life anymore. That no matter what time of day it is or where you are, what you write, what you post is going to represent the hospital or where you work as well as yourself. So you don't go home and pull the chase because it follows you.
It's kind of the case. It's that sort of case.
And I think what we were talking about earlier when you alluded to the children or young people, they're going to have to enter the job market. And what they're posting interesting as a teenager may come back to haunt them because as part of recruiting and screening of applicants, the access to social media is more important. And that probably when you started to post. And you don't get the benefit of that in terms of what you may have met when you were 15 and you said that particular thing or posted that particular picture. But people will make judgments about it. And in a very competitive market, you may not get the advantage that you hoped you would.
And in some ways, it's a different medium, but the same has been true. Among your friends, what you say and do reflects on where you work, and what you do at work reflects on you personally. But now, our world is so much broader. It is literally the entire digital world.
String words together, make a sentence, and you can dot an I and cross a T. But that's what we're going to look at that for. There's some other information, but we're also going to go see if we can find you out there in the digital world.
We've used it.
We use it with clients in real estate. You know, if somebody calls and leaves a message and you want to know a bit more about them before you talk to them, you just go and look up their social media profile and you find out, kind of how old they are, and whether they've got kids, and where they live. I mean, I jokingly call it stalking. It's not really stalking, but it's certainly investigation, and it's all out there. I mean, all you have to do is just go to Google and search for your name, and you may be very surprised at what you find. I hope you're not. I'm pleasantly surprised at what you find. Oh, this looks like a nice person.
We're starting to run out of time, so I'd like to this has been a lot of doom and gloom about social media. Can y'all speak to what the upside of social media is?
Absolutely. I think it keeps us connected and learning in a way that we never could before. I mean, you think about the people that you can network with and the people that share information that's valuable to you, and the way your world expands that we never had before. For instance, I'll go back to lymphedema. I have congenital lymphedema. It's very, very rare. There's very few people in town who have it. My network of people that I can relate to that is very small. But throughout the United States, there are a lot of people who share information. There are blogs and social media sites. So whatever your interests are now, it's that campfire. Your campfire is so much bigger. I think it's just that you have to be responsible and think about what you're going to say and what you're going to post. I think there's more risk in the pictures than the words. But it's a great way to share information. I read an article about, when I was doing some research about, in a hospital, I think it was a teaching hospital, and they were doing a surgery that's very rarely done. And they had a representative in that operating room and one in another place with a doctor who had done a similar surgery, tweeting back and forth for information. And I think if you, I'm sure it's some private way to do it, I would hope, but our world has expanded, but we have so many more ways to learn, and so many interesting people to meet, and so many ways to connect that we can't where we're located. We just have to be aware of what we post, and post the good stuff and the honest stuff, but stay away from the rumor and the innuendo and the shocking things, because I think those are what you get you in trouble.
Very well said.
Thank you.
Does anybody else have any